Ha! He can't hear. He can't talk. The cruel shout rang out across the open pavement near the fountain, sharp and mocking. Laughter followed, high-pitched and merciless. A pack of children circling like birds sensing weakness. Lucas Harris froze. 7 years old, small for his age, with brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. He had been kneeling happily moments before, tracing the outline of a sun with bright yellow chalk. Now the chalk slipped from his fingers and rolled across the cement. He pressed his hands against his chest, as if he could hide the very part of himself that set him apart. The group of kids was maybe half a dozen, 8- and 9-year-olds with sneakers worn from running, and faces flushed with the energy of play. But their smiles weren't kind. One boy flapped his hands in wild exaggeration, mimicking the movements Lucas sometimes used to communicate. Another girl pointed and whispered too loudly, "Why doesn't he say anything? It's so weird." Lucas's chest tightened. He had never spoken a word in his life. Born deaf. Born without a voice. He had learned to live in a world where silence was constant. His father had taught him signs. Patient teachers had given him ways to understand. But none of that mattered here, not in the ring of laughter and pointing fingers. His throat ached with the unspoken wish that he could tell them who he was. A few yards away, Daniel Harris, his father, stood with a phone pressed to his ear. The man was 45, dressed neatly but casually, in jeans and a sport coat. Even here, on a weekend in the park, business clung to him. His voice, steady and commanding, carried into the breeze as he spoke to a partner overseas. He didn't see what was happening to his son. Not yet. Lucas bent lower, staring at the half-finished sundae. His small shoulders shook. A tear traced down his cheek. If he could have wished for anything, it would have been to disappear into the gray stone of the pavement. The tall boy, clearly the leader, stepped closer. He nudged the chalk drawing with the toe of his sneaker, smearing the edge. "What is this supposed to be? Dumb picture." He sneered. And the others laughed harder. Lucas's fingers twitched. He wanted to sign something. Anything, but he couldn't bring himself to lift his hands. His world was shrinking into a tight knot of shame and fear, and then another voice cut through. "Stop it." The words were sharp, high-pitched, and filled with a courage none of the laughing children expected. Every head turned. A little girl stood just a few feet away. Braids tied with pink ribbons swaying as she planted her feet firmly on the pavement. Her skin glowed in the late afternoon sun, and though she was only 6 years old, her dark eyes burned with an intensity that silenced even the loudest jeer. Her name was Anna. She wore a faded yellow dress, sandals too big for her small feet. The kind of clothes that had clearly been worn by siblings before her. She was the daughter of a park janitor, a child most adults overlooked. But right now, she looked larger than life. "Leave him alone," Anna said. Her voice didn't waver. The tall boy blinked, then scoffed. "Why do you care? He's broken. He can't even talk." Anna ignored him. She walked past the circle, straight to Lucas, who stared at her with wide, confused eyes. She crouched beside him, picked up the chalk he had dropped, and placed it gently back in his hand. Then she did something none of them expected. She lifted her small fingers, clumsy but deliberate, and formed a simple sign she remembered from preschool lessons. 2 hands pressed together, then opening like a book. "Friend." Lucas's breath caught. His eyes, still wet with tears, widened in wonder. Outside of his father, no one had ever spoken his language before. The laughter around them faltered. A few children muttered uncertainly, shifting their weight. One boy whispered, "Now she's acting weird too." But Anna didn't care. She smiled at Lucas, held his hand, and whispered, "You're not alone." For the first time that afternoon, Lucas let his hands rise again. Trembling, tentative, he shaped a sign back to her. "Thank you." And in that fragile moment, as the breeze lifted Anna's ribbons and the sound of kites cracked in the sky, the cruel laughter lost its strength. Daniel Harris, still speaking firmly into his phone, hadn't yet seen what was happening, but when he turned around, he would. And he would never forget the little girl who stood up when his own son could not. Daniel Harris ended his call with the usual mix of triumph and exhaustion. Deals always left him with a strange aftertaste, like drinking something strong that burned on the way down. He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned toward the fountain, expecting to see his son still crouched over his chalk drawings, oblivious to the world. What he saw instead made his chest tighten. A small crowd of children lingered near Lucas. Their laughter hushed now, uncertain, as if the rules of the game had changed. And in the middle of it all was a little girl Daniel didn't recognize. She was holding Lucas's hand, tiny fingers curled around his. Lucas, his face still streaked with a faint line of dried tears, was staring at her as though she had descended from another world. Daniel quickened his pace, his protective instincts rising, but something held him back. Lucas's shoulders, normally hunched when strangers drew near, were a little straighter. His hands, usually hidden when mocked, were moving again, hesitant, fragile, but alive. Daniel slowed, watching. Anna signed again, clumsy but determined. She pressed her palms together and opened them like wings. Friend. Lucas's lips parted, not in sound, but in a breath of relief. His own hands answered, "Thank you." Daniel's throat tightened. He felt a memory stir the first time Lucas had signed that same phrase to him, years ago, after a long day of therapy sessions when the boy had collapsed into his arms. Daniel had believed then that he would spend his entire life being the only one to understand his son. But here was this little girl, 6 years old, stepping into Lucas's silence without hesitation. The tall boy, the one who had smeared Lucas's chalk sun, tried to recover his swagger. "You're both weird," he muttered, though his voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. He glanced at his friends, hoping for backup. But one of the girls shifted uncomfortably and looked at the ground. Another boy scratched his arm and mumbled, "Maybe we should go." Anna didn't even look at them. She leaned closer to Lucas and whispered, "Do you want to draw more?" She didn't know many signs, but her tone was soft, and she mimed a drawing motion with her hand. Lucas blinked at her, then opened his chalk box again. He picked a blue stick and drew a wide arc across the pavement, the beginnings of a sky to replace the sun that had been smeared. Anna grinned. "Pretty," she said, pointing to the shape. Then she tried another sign, clumsy again, hands waving side to side, like ripples. "Sky." Lucas's eyes lit with recognition. He added a white streak, shaping clouds. Daniel finally approached. He crouched, resting a hand on Lucas's small shoulder. "Hey, champ," he said, voice low. Lucas turned to him, uncertain, as though afraid his father might pull him away. Daniel shook his head, forcing a smile. "I like your drawing. And I see you made a new friend." He looked at Anna. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl stood up a little straighter. "Anna," she said proudly. Her braids bounced with the movement. "I told them to stop being mean. He's my friend now." Daniel swallowed hard. "Thank you, Anna," he said sincerely. "You have no idea how much that means." Anna tilted her head. "He's really nice. He just talks different." "Exactly," Daniel said. He looked at Lucas, who was watching their lips carefully, piecing together meaning with the skill he had honed through years of silent observation. Daniel signed slowly, deliberately. "Proud of you." Lucas's mouth curved into the faintest of smiles. Behind them, the other children drifted away, embarrassed or bored now that their cruelty had lost its audience. Only the tall boy lingered, arms crossed, but even he shuffled backward when Anna turned to glare at him. Finally, he muttered something under his breath and jogged off after the others. For a moment, the park felt quiet again, though laughter and music still floated from other corners. Daniel watched as Lucas and Anna knelt side by side, filling the pavement with color suns, clouds, flowers, shapes that only children could imagine. People passing by slowed to glance at the picture, some smiling. Daniel sat on a nearby bench, his elbows on his knees, and let out a long breath. His heart still raced from the surge of panic when he'd first seen the crowd. But now another feeling pressed deeper. Gratitude. Gratitude for this tiny stranger who had done what he, with all his billions, could not give his son the courage to keep his hands moving in the face of cruelty. He thought of his own childhood, of growing up in a neighborhood where kids with glasses or accents or limp clothes were easy prey. He had learned early to fight back with words, then with ambition, building a fortress of success no one could mock. But Lucas could not fight back that way. His son's silence was both his greatest beauty and his greatest vulnerability. Daniel had always feared it would isolate him forever. Yet here was Anna, bridging the gap with nothing more than a brave heart and a clumsy sign for friend. Lucas looked up suddenly, tugged at his sleeve, and signed a quick phrase. Daniel leaned closer, watching the boy's small fingers move. She saved me. Daniel's breath caught. He signed back. Yes, she did. His eyes stung, and he blinked quickly, unwilling to cry in front of them. Anna, not understanding the full exchange, grinned anyway. Want me to show you something? She asked Lucas. She pulled a small marble from her pocket. Its glassy surface catching the sunday. I carry it everywhere. My mom says it's my lucky marble. She rolled it across the pavement. Lucas picked it up carefully, examined it, then placed it back in her palm with a solemn nod. Anna laughed. See? Now it's lucky for both of us. Daniel stood and offered a hand to Anna. She looked at it, then shook it with surprising seriousness. You're a good man for helping him, she said, voice innocent but oddly weighty for a child. Daniel smiled, humbled. No, Anna, today, you're the good one. As the shadows of late afternoon stretched across the park, Daniel knew the day had changed something fundamental. Lucas had not spoken, and never would. But he had been heard, and it was because a little girl with pink ribbons in her braids had decided not to laugh when everyone else did. He glanced at his phone, still buzzing occasionally with messages from overseas. For once, he ignored it. Some things mattered more than business. Some things, he thought, were worth every fortune in the world. The park had quieted around them, as if the laughter and cruelty of moments earlier had been carried off by the breeze. The fountain gurgled peacefully. Pigeons strutted across the grass in search of crumbs, and the sun painted long golden stripes across the pavement where Lucas and Anna sat side by side. For the first time that afternoon, Lucas's breathing steadied. His hands, once hidden, were free again. Chalk dust clinging to his small fingers like proof that he had survived the storm. Anna plopped down on the pavement beside him, her yellow dress spreading around her knees like a halo of faded sunshine. What else can you draw? She asked brightly, peering into his chalk box as though it were a treasure chest. Lucas tilted his head, studying her lips carefully. He didn't catch every word, but her tone was unmistakable kind, curious, unafraid. He picked a piece of green chalk and began sketching the outline of a tree. The strokes were firm, practiced. He had drawn trees 100 times before, always with branches stretching toward something unseen. Anna clapped her hands. That's pretty, she said. She leaned closer and added, Here, let me try. She grabbed a pink stick and scrawled something at the base of the tree, crooked, uneven lines that didn't resemble much. She giggled. Okay, maybe I'm not good at it. Lucas smiled faintly, a real smile, small but unmistakable. He took the chalk from her hand and, with a few quick strokes, reshaped her scribbles into a flower blooming beneath the tree. Anna gasped. Wow, you fixed it? Her eyes shone with admiration. You're like magic with colors. Daniel, sitting on the bench a few steps away, watched the exchange. His chest ached with a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. He had seen Lucas draw countless times, alone in his room, chalk dust and crayons scattered across the floor. But this was different. Here was his son, sharing his gift with someone outside the safe walls of home, and being met not with ridicule but with delight. Daniel leaned back, hands clasped, letting the scene etch itself into his memory. Anna set the pink chalk down and tapped Lucas gently on the arm to get his attention. She lifted her small hands and signed again. Slowly, carefully. Friend. Lucas froze for an instant, then answered with trembling hands. Yes, friend. Anna squealed in triumph, even though her sign had been imperfect. I understood that one, she said proudly. She beamed at Daniel as if expecting praise, and he found himself smiling back, overcome by her courage. The sound of sneakers scuffing the pavement interrupted the moment. The tall boy who had led the teasing earlier lingered a few yards away, arms crossed, face tight. His friends had left, but he hadn't. His eyes flicked from Lucas's drawing to Anna's stubborn little figure beside him. "What are you even doing?" the boy demanded, voice low but edged. "He can't hear you. He can't talk. He's just broken." The words hung in the air like smoke. Anna stood up, tiny but fierce, and planted herself between Lucas and the boy. Her braids swung as she shook her head. "He's not broken," she said firmly. "You are if you think being mean makes you strong." The boy scowled, caught off guard by the force of her reply. His lips moved as though he wanted to retort, but nothing came. Finally, he kicked at the dirt and stalked away, muttering under his breath. Lucas watched the boy retreat, his wide eyes flicking to Anna. He touched her sleeve and signed haltingly. "Safe?" Anna didn't understand the sign perfectly, but she understood his eyes. She nodded vigorously. "Safe," she said. Then, with a child's instinct, she reached for his hand again and held it tightly. Daniel felt his throat constrict. He wanted to sweep both children into his arms, to protect them from a world that too often confused cruelty for power, but he stayed on the bench, letting the moment belong to them. He knew, perhaps better than anyone, that Lucas needed to feel the triumph for himself. Anna knelt again and whispered, "Do you want to teach me more?" She wiggled her fingers in the air, imitating a sign she'd once seen in a classroom video. It wasn't right, but her eagerness was unmistakable. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, he showed her the sign for sky hands sweeping across in a wide arc. Anna copied him, clumsy but determined, and Lucas nodded approval. His face brightened. For once, he wasn't the object of ridicule. He was the teacher. "Sky," Anna repeated aloud, looking up at the stretch of blue above them. "Big sky." She spread her arms wide. Lucas followed her gaze, then pressed both palms to his chest in a gesture Daniel knew well. It meant happy. Anna tilted her head, watching him. "What's that mean?" she asked. Daniel stood and walked over, crouching beside them. "He's saying he's happy," he explained gently. Anna's grin widened. "Me too," she said. Then she repeated the sign, pressing her own palms to her chest, awkward but earnest. "Happy." Lucas's eyes sparkled. For the first time that day, he laughed not with sound, but with the bright, silent laughter of his eyes and smile. Wide and unguarded, Daniel felt a tear slip down his cheek before he could stop it. He brushed it away quickly, not wanting either child to see. "You're amazing, Anna," he whispered, voice rough. She shrugged as if it were nothing. "My mom says if you see someone all alone, you should sit with them." "That's all I did." "That's everything," Daniel said quietly. The afternoon stretched on, filled with chalk drawings and halting signs and laughter that didn't need sound to be understood. By the time the sun dipped lower and the shadows lengthened, the pavement near the fountain had become a canvas of suns, trees, flowers, and stars. At the center of it all was a simple picture. Two small hands reaching for each other, outlined in white and gold. Daniel took a photo of it, his heart swelling. Someday, he thought, he would show this picture to Lucas, when his son doubted himself. Someday, he would remind him of the little girl with pink ribbons who had stood up when the world tried to push him down. As they packed up the chalk, Anna looked at Lucas and said solemnly, "We're friends now. That means I'll help you. Always." Lucas didn't have a sign for always, not yet. But he understood. He signed back, friend. Safe, happy. Anna clapped her hands in delight. "See? I'm learning already." Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the weight of it gentle but firm. "Yes, buddy," he said softly. "This is just the beginning." And in that golden hour, with the park humming quietly around them, it felt true. The sun dipped lower in the sky, streaking the park with shades of amber and rose. Parents began gathering their children, calling out names across the lawn. The smell of hot dogs and roasted peanuts drifted from a vendor's cart, mingling with the laughter that carried on the breeze. For most families, the afternoon was winding down into nothing more than a pleasant memory. For Daniel Harris, it was something else entirely. He watched his son kneel beside Anna, still drawing, still smiling. The boy's fingers moved cautiously but without shame now, shaping signs that Anna eagerly tried to copy. Daniel wanted to bottle this moment, to freeze it forever, but behind his pride lurked a familiar shadow, fear. He knew too well how fleeting such acceptance could be. Tomorrow, next week, next month, what would happen when Anna wasn't there? When no brave voice rose to silence the laughter, Daniel's phone buzzed again, a sharp reminder of the world waiting for him beyond the park. He ignored it this time, his gaze locked on Lucas. The boy was crouched low, chalk dust on his hands, eyes glowing with the quiet joy of being seen. Anna plopped down beside him, her braids bouncing. "What else can you show me?" she asked. Lucas hesitated, then formed a sign, slow, deliberate. Tree. He shaped his arms like branches stretching upward. Anna mimicked him, stumbling over the motion but laughing when Lucas nodded approval. Daniel's chest tightened. It was such a simple thing. Two children sharing a language most others overlooked. Yet it carried the weight of something monumental. He thought of all the nights he had lain awake, wondering if his son would ever find someone to understand him. He had imagined specialists, tutors, endless therapy sessions. He had not imagined a little girl with ribbons and stubborn courage. A pair of older women passed by, pausing to watch the children's drawings. One leaned toward the other, whispering, "That poor boy. Such a shame." Daniel's jaw clenched. The words cut deeper than the children's earlier laughter. He turned sharply, ready to speak. But then Lucas looked up at him, eyes wide and searching. Daniel forced himself to soften. He signed to his son, "Ignore them. You are not broken." Lucas nodded faintly and returned to his chalk. Anna, however, had heard the women. She stood up, fists clenched, and shouted after them, "He's not poor. He's special." Her small voice carried farther than Daniel expected. The women turned, startled, then shuffled away quickly, murmuring apologies. Daniel blinked. He hadn't realized until that moment how much he needed someone else to say it out loud, to defend Lucas with that kind of fierceness. Gratitude swelled in him, mingled with a sting of shame. He was a billionaire, a man with influence across continents. Yet it had taken a 6-year-old to say what he sometimes could not. When Anna sat down again, Lucas reached out and tapped her shoulder. He signed something, hesitant but sure. "Brave." Anna squinted, then looked to Daniel. "What does that mean?" Daniel smiled softly. "He's calling you brave." Anna's grin stretched ear to ear. "I like that," she said. "Brave." She signed it back to Lucas, a little awkward but close enough. "Brave friends." Lucas's smile returned, brighter this time. The afternoon drifted on. They drew more pictures. A house with a crooked roof. A dog with too many legs. A rainbow stretching across cracked pavement. Passersby slowed, some smiling, others puzzled. But no one mocked anymore. The air had changed. As the sky shifted toward dusk, Daniel knew it was time to leave. He stood and brushed the dust from his pants. "All right, champ," he said gently. "We should head home." He glanced at Anna. "Would you like a ride, Anna? Where's your mom or dad?" Anna shook her head. "My mom's still working. She cleans near the lake. I can wait for her." She said it matter-of-factly, as if staying alone in the park was nothing unusual. Daniel hesitated. He wanted to insist, to call her mother, to make sure she was safe. But he also saw the independence in her eyes, the kind of strength born from knowing the world wasn't always kind. He nodded slowly. "All right. But thank you again, Anna. You made this day more than I can say." Anna shrugged. "He's my friend now. Friends help each other." She turned to Lucas. "See you soon?" Lucas hesitated, then signed, "Yes, friend, happy." Daniel translated softly. He says yes. He'll be happy to see you again. Anna clapped her hands in delight. Good. As Daniel led Lucas toward the SUV, he felt his son tug gently at his hand. Lucas looked back once, waving shyly to Anna. She waved both hands wildly in return, ribbons fluttering like flags of victory. The drive home was quiet at first. Lucas leaned against the window, clutching a piece of chalk in his fist. Daniel glanced at him in the rearview mirror, heart aching with a love so fierce it scared him. Finally, he spoke. She was special, wasn't she? Lucas turned, met his father's eyes, and signed one word with absolute certainty. Hope. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking against the sudden blur in his vision. Yes, son, he whispered. Hope. That night, long after Lucas had fallen asleep with chalk dust still on his hands, Daniel sat alone in his study. The city lights stretched across the bay, glittering like 1,000 temptations. His phone buzzed with unread messages, demands for his time, his money, his attention. He silenced it and looked instead at the photo he had taken in the park. 2 small hands, one white and one brown, reaching toward each other in chalk. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stirring beneath the armor of wealth and power, something fragile, something human. He realized that the moment he had witnessed between his son and that little girl was not just a fleeting kindness. It was a sign. A first sign of friendship. A first sign of change. The next morning, Daniel woke early, long before the sun had burned away the gray veil of fog that often draped across San Francisco. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the photo on his phone once again, the one he had taken of Lucas and Anna's chalk drawing. 2 hands, one reaching, one receiving. Glowing with childlike color, it seemed like nothing more than a scrawl to most, but to him, it was scripture. He dressed quietly, moving through the stillness of the house. The Harris estate was large, too large for 2 people. A mansion filled with high ceilings and empty rooms. Daniel had always told himself he kept it for privacy, for security. But sometimes, in the early morning silence, he admitted it was simply loneliness, dressed in marble and glass. When he entered Lucas's room, he found the boy already awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug with paper spread around him. Crayons littered the floor like candy. Lucas was drawing again, brow furrowed in concentration, small hands working fast and sure. Daniel crouched beside him. "What are you making, champ?" Lucas looked up, his eyes bright, and turned the paper toward his father. On it was a figure, a small girl with braids tied with pink ribbons, standing beside a boy who looked very much like Lucas himself. Above them, Lucas had drawn a sun that stretched across the whole page. Daniel's chest tightened. "Anna," he said softly. Lucas nodded eagerly and signed. "Friend." "Yes," Daniel murmured, pulling his son into a hug. "Your friend." "Oh." Later that morning, they drove back to Golden Gate Park. Daniel had meetings waiting, calls lined up, but he couldn't bring himself to bury his son in solitude again. He parked in the same spot, and together they walked to the fountain. Lucas's chalk box rattled with each step. The park was busier than the day before. Joggers moved in steady rhythm along the path, couples strolled with coffee cups, children shrieked on the playground. Daniel's eyes scanned automatically, searching for pink ribbons. And there she was, Anna perched on the edge of a bench, swinging her legs as if she were keeping time with a song only she could hear. When she spotted them, her face lit up. "Hi," she shouted, leaping to her feet. She ran to Lucas, who stiffened at the sudden rush but then relaxed when she grabbed his hand. "I knew you'd come back." Lucas signed quickly, "Happy, friend." Daniel translated, and Anna bounced in delight. "Me too." They settled on the pavement again, chalk in hand. Lucas began sketching immediately, and Anna tried to keep up, her lines messy but enthusiastic. Daniel sat nearby, watching them, his heart lighter than it had been in years. But not everyone shared their joy. A pair of boys from the day before had returned, older than Anna, younger than Daniel could call them anything but children. They lingered near the fountain, whispering and smirking. One of them pointed at Lucas, then at Anna, and rolled his eyes. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to stand, to use his authority, his money, his very presence to scatter them. But something held him back. He wanted to see what his son would do. The boys approached. "Hey," one sneered. "Why are you still hanging out with him? He doesn't even talk." "He's useless." Anna whipped around, braids flying. "He's not useless," she snapped. Her little fists balled at her sides. "He can draw better than anyone. He's my friend." Lucas shrank slightly, but Anna squeezed his hand, grounding him. She bent down, picked up a piece of chalk, and thrust it at one of the boys. "Here. You try." The boy blinked, confused. "What?" "Draw," Anna demanded. "If you think you're better, show us." The boy scoffed but crouched reluctantly, dragging a sloppy line across the cement. His friend laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Anna pounced on the chance. "See? Not so easy, is it?" She turned to Lucas. "Show him." Lucas hesitated, then bent down. With quick strokes, he transformed the boy's jagged line into the shape of a bird, wings spread, soaring into the sky. The transformation was so fast, so graceful, that even the mocking boys stared in silence. Anna clapped. "Say, magic." Daniel exhaled slowly, pride swelling inside him. Lucas hadn't spoken a word, but he had answered in the only language he knew, art. The boys shuffled, embarrassed. One muttered something Daniel couldn't catch, then tugged at his friend's sleeve. They walked away, not laughing this time, only glancing back once with unreadable expressions. Lucas looked at Anna, uncertain. She beamed at him. "You're amazing," she said. Then she leaned close and whispered, "Don't ever hide your hands again." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Those were words he himself had tried to say to his son for years. But somehow, from Anna's lips, they landed differently. Lucas nodded, slowly at first, then with conviction. He signed back to her, brave, friend, happy. Anna didn't understand every sign, but she caught enough. She signed back her favorite word, the one she knew best. Friend. Daniel sat back, his heart swelling. The echo of yesterday's cruel laughter still haunted him, but it no longer held power. In its place was something new, something fragile, yet unbreakable. As the sun rose higher and the children drew together, Daniel realized that the bond forming before him was not just a friendship. It was a shield against loneliness, against cruelty, against a world that too often misunderstood silence. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to believe that his son's future could be brighter than he ever dared imagine. By the third day in a row, the fountain pavement had become more than just a place to play. It was a stage, a classroom, a sanctuary. The park regulars began to notice the joggers who usually kept their heads down slowed. The mothers with strollers paused. Even the elderly men who played chess on the benches craned their necks to see what the children were doing. Word had begun to spread about the little boy who did not speak, the little girl who stood by him, and the pictures they drew together in chalk. Daniel arrived with Lucas just after noon. He carried a coffee in one hand, Lucas's chalk tin in the other. His son skipped slightly, his energy brighter now, buoyed by the thought of seeing Anna. For years, Daniel had walked through the world with the weight of worry pressing him down. Today, for the first time in a long time, he felt lighter too. Anna was waiting. She sat cross-legged on the pavement with a stick of chalk already in her hand, pink ribbons bouncing as she waved. "You're late," she teased. Lucas giggled silently, covering his mouth, then tugged his father's sleeve and signed friend. "Happy?" Daniel translated, and Anna clapped her hands. They got to work quickly. Anna tried to draw a dog, though its legs came out uneven and its ears looked more like horns. Lucas leaned over, careful and gentle, reshaping the lines until a playful puppy appeared. Anna gasped. "You're like magic," she said again. And Lucas's cheeks flushed with pride. But today, Lucas wanted to show more. He picked up a fresh piece of white chalk and began to draw with intent, his strokes sure, his little hand moving quickly across the pavement. He sketched the outline of wings, stretched wide across the cement, feathers detailed one by one. The bird took shape, soaring upward as though it might take off into the sky at any moment. When he finished, Lucas stepped back and pressed his palms to his chest, his lips curved, eyes shining. Anna whispered, "It's beautiful." Daniel felt something stir deep in his chest. He had always known his son was gifted, but watching him pour his soul into chalk on a public sidewalk was something different. It wasn't just art. It was a declaration. A group of children gathered, drawn by the sight. Some were curious, others skeptical. One boy, not the same tall ringleader from before, but another with the same sharp tone, snorted, "It's just chalk. Anyone can draw that." Anna spun around, hands on her hips. "Then you try," she challenged. "Bet you can't." The boy rolled his eyes but crouched down anyway, scratching a crooked line that vaguely resembled a bird. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but not cruel this time, more amused at the boy's failed attempt. Lucas, instead of shrinking back, knelt down and fixed the drawing with a few simple strokes, turning the awkward shape into another bird. This one smaller, flying beside the first. The crowd murmured. Anna clapped. "See? He makes everything better." Daniel's heart swelled as Lucas looked around, no longer hiding his hands. He signed boldly to Anna, "Bird, fly, free." Daniel translated aloud, his voice steady. "He says birds fly free." The words rippled through the small gathering. An older woman at the back dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A young father leaned down to his son and whispered, "See? Different doesn't mean less." The boy nodded solemnly, but not everyone softened. The tall boy from the first day reappeared at the edge of the crowd, his expression dark. His eyes flicked from the chalkbird to Lucas, then to Anna. He muttered something Daniel couldn't hear, but the set of his jaw made Daniel uneasy. Anna noticed him too. She straightened her back, braids swinging like little banners of defiance. She stepped closer to Lucas, whispering, "Don't worry, I'm here." Lucas looked at her, his hands trembling for just a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he signed slowly, "Brave." Together, Daniel's breath caught. His son had never strung words like that in public before. He repeated the translation for Anna, and the little girl's face lit up. "Yes," she shouted. "Brave together." She threw her arms around Lucas, nearly knocking the chalk tin over. The crowd chuckled warmly, and the tension broke. People applauded quietly, as though witnessing something sacred. The tall boy scowled and disappeared again, but his absence felt smaller this time, less important against the glow of what Lucas and Anna had created. As the afternoon waned, the great chalkbird remained on the pavement, wings outstretched, casting its shadow across every passerby. Daniel stood, phone in hand. But this time he didn't take a photo. He simply watched, imprinting it on his heart. He knew the world outside the park would not always be kind. There would be more laughter, more cruelty, more days when silence felt like a prison. But right here, in this moment, his son was free, and he owed it to both Lucas and Anna to protect that freedom, no matter the cost. When the time came to leave, Lucas tugged at Anna's sleeve. He signed one word, clear and confident. "Tomorrow." Anna's grin spread wide. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Daniel helped Lucas gather his chalks, and as they walked back to the SUV, he glanced once more at the bird on the pavement. Its wings stretched across the gray stone, a promise etched in dust and color. It would fade with the rain, with footsteps, with time. But its meaning would not. By the time Daniel pulled the SUV into the park again, the weekend crowds had thinned. It was late afternoon, the kind of soft hour when the sunlight slid gently across the trees and the fountain glimmered gold. Lucas had pressed his face against the window the whole ride, fingers tapping on the glass in an impatient rhythm. He couldn't wait to see Anna. She was already there, waiting on the same stretch of pavement near the fountain. Her yellow dress looked a little more faded today, her sandals a little more worn, but her energy was just as bright. She waved both hands the moment she saw them, pink ribbons dancing in the breeze. Lucas bounded toward her with his chalk tin rattling in his hand. Anna crouched down, greeting him with the one sign she knew best. "Friend," Lucas answered quickly. "Happy." Daniel followed slowly, his eyes scanning the park. Something in him had shifted over these past days. His guard was higher, sharper. The world had shown him how quickly joy could be interrupted by cruelty. And he wasn't about to be caught unaware again. The children wasted no time. Lucas knelt on the pavement and began sketching a river in blue chalk, rippling across the stone. Anna added a crooked boat with a pink sail. She laughed when Lucas carefully reshaped it into something real, guiding her hand so the sail curved with the wind. Ugh. The moment was pure, fragile, and then, like a stone thrown into still water, the disturbance came. The tall boy had returned. He walked with two other boys this time, older, louder, carrying sodas in their hands and swagger in their steps. His eyes locked on Lucas immediately, narrowing into a cruel smile. "Well, look who's still here," he sneered, "the little mute." His voice carried, sharp enough to draw glances from nearby benches. Lucas froze, chalk still in his hand, his shoulders hunched, as if preparing for a blow he couldn't avoid. Anna jumped up instantly. "Stop it. Leave him alone," the tall boy smirked. "What's he gonna do if I don't? Cry again?" His friends laughed. One of them added, "Or maybe flap his hands around like a broken puppet." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. He started forward, every instinct telling him to step in, to crush this ugliness with the weight of his authority. But then he saw Anna, tiny, fierce, unshaken. He stopped, heart pounding, waiting. Anna's face flushed red. She took a step closer to the boy, fists balled. "He's not broken," she shouted. "He talks with his hands. You're just too dumb to understand." The boy faltered for half a second, surprised by her boldness, but he recovered quickly. "He's still weird. No one wants to play with someone who can't talk." Lucas's hands trembled. He lowered the chalk, retreating inward the way Daniel had seen too many times before. The light dimmed in his eyes, Anna noticed. She turned on her heel and dropped to her knees beside him. "Don't listen to them," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare hide your hands." She grabbed his fingers gently and tugged them forward. "Show them." Lucas stared at her, chest rising and falling quickly. He looked at the chalk in his other hand, then at the half-finished river. Slowly, painfully, he began to draw again. His strokes were shaky at first, but then steadied, sweeping across the pavement. He sketched a bridge over the river, strong and tall, with two small figures standing at the center. Anna gasped. "That's us," she whispered. She looked at the boys, her chin high. "See? He's not weird. He's an artist." The crowd that had begun to gather murmured in agreement. An elderly man with a cane nodded, saying, "That boy's got talent." A young woman pulled out her phone, not to mock, but to record with awe. The tall boy's smirk faltered. He kicked at the pavement near the drawing, scuffing the edge of the bridge, but his friends didn't laugh this time. One of them muttered, "Come on, let's go," tugging at his sleeve. For a moment, Daniel thought it was over. But the boy hesitated, glaring at Lucas, and muttered one last time, "He'll never be normal." The words hit harder than the laughter. Daniel stepped forward now, unable to hold back. He stood tall, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "Normal?" he said. "Normal is just a word people use when they're afraid of what they don't understand." The boy froze, caught in the gaze of a man who carried authority in every syllable. For the first time, he looked small. He muttered something under his breath and stalked away, his friends trailing behind him. Silence fell over the little circle. Then Anna, still clutching Lucas's hand, turned to him and whispered, "You're better than normal. You're amazing." Lucas's eyes filled, but this time not with tears of shame. He signed carefully. "Brave. Together. Strong." Daniel translated, his voice thick with emotion. "He says you're brave. Together you're strong." Anna beamed, hugging Lucas tightly. "That's right," she said. Together, the crowd clapped softly, and Daniel's heart swelled. His son had faced cruelty again, but this time he hadn't crumbled. He had drawn, he had spoken in the language of colors and lines, and he had been heard. As the sun slipped lower, painting the fountain in molten gold, Daniel realized something profound. His son would always face the echo of laughter, but with Anna by his side, Lucas had something far stronger than silence. He had courage. That night, long after Lucas had fallen asleep, Daniel stood at his office window with a glass of water in hand. The city stretched beneath him, a tapestry of lights and motion, alive even in darkness. But his mind wasn't on mergers or markets. It was replaying a single phrase: he'll never be normal. He had heard versions of it before, whispered in hospitals, murmured in schools, buried in reports written by specialists. Words that had haunted him since the day Lucas was born, but hearing them spat out by a child in a park, sharp, careless, cruel, felt like a wound being reopened. Daniel set down his glass, rubbing his temple. He had fought battles most men couldn't imagine. He had clawed his way out of poverty, endured humiliation, sacrificed sleep and safety to build the empire people now envied. But nothing, not even billion-dollar deals, felt as heavy as protecting his son from a world that measured worth in the wrong ways. A soft knock pulled him back. The door opened just enough for Lucas to peek in. He was supposed to be asleep, but his small figure lingered in the doorway. Pajamas wrinkled, hair mussed. He padded inside silently and climbed onto the leather chair across from Daniel's desk. Daniel smiled faintly. "Can't sleep, champ?" Lucas shook his head. He raised his hands slowly, shaping signs in the glow of the desk lamp. Bad words. Hurt. Daniel's heart clenched. He moved around the desk and crouched in front of his son. "Yeah," he whispered. "They hurt me too." Lucas tilted his head, studying his father's lips carefully. His hands moved again. "I'm not broken." Daniel's throat tightened. "No," he said fiercely. "You're not broken. You're whole, just as you are." He clasped his son's small hands in his own, squeezing gently. "Don't ever forget that." For a long moment, they stayed like that, father and son, bound together not by words but by something stronger. Eventually, Lucas's eyelids grew heavy. Daniel carried him back to bed, tucking him beneath the soft blankets. As he brushed a strand of hair from the boy's forehead, Lucas stirred and signed one last word before drifting off. "Anna." Daniel smiled. "Yes, Anna," he whispered. "Your brave friend." The next afternoon, they returned to the park. Lucas skipped ahead, chalk tin rattling like a drumbeat of anticipation. Anna was already there, waiting with a wide grin. She had a paper bag in her hands, greasy at the bottom from fried chicken. "I saved some," she declared proudly. She pulled out a drumstick, wrapped in a napkin, and handed it to Lucas. "My mom says sharing food makes friends forever." Lucas stared at the offering, uncertain, then looked to his father. Daniel nodded encouragingly. Lucas took the drumstick carefully, held it for a moment, then signed. "Thank you." Anna frowned, trying to mimic the motion. "Thank you," she repeated clumsily. Lucas's eyes widened in delight. He signed it again, slower this time, guiding her fingers. When she managed to copy it, he laughed silently, shoulders shaking. They settled onto the pavement, eating fried chicken and sipping from a shared bottle of soda. Daniel sat nearby, watching them. He thought of his own childhood, how rare it had been to share food when he was growing up. How hunger had been a daily companion. He thought of how far he had come. How wealth had insulated him from want. Yet here was his son, finding connection not in extravagance, but in a simple drumstick offered by a little girl with ribbons in her hair. After they ate, Lucas pulled out his chalks. He began sketching a house this time, with a roof that slanted too steeply, and windows that glowed with bright yellow squares. Beside it, he drew two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. Anna tilted her head. "That's you and your dad," she guessed. Lucas nodded, then added a third figure, a little girl with ribbons. He looked at Anna and signed. "Family." Anna blinked. "Family?" she repeated softly. Her voice wavered just a little. She smiled, but her eyes glistened in the sunlight. "Yeah, family." She bent down and hugged him suddenly, tightly. Daniel felt something inside him crack and heal all at once. He turned his face slightly, pretending to check his phone so the children wouldn't see the tears gathering in his eyes. The spell was broken by the sound of footsteps. Daniel looked up sharply. The tall boy was back again, this time alone. His hands were jammed into his pockets, his steps slower, less certain. Anna bristled immediately, jumping to her feet. "What do you want?" she demanded. The boy shuffled. His eyes darted to the chalk drawings, then to Lucas. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Finally, he muttered, I wasn't trying to be mean yesterday. I was just joking." Anna's eyes narrowed. It wasn't funny. The boy's face flushed. He looked at Lucas, who was staring at him warily, hands curled protectively around his chalk. The boy swallowed hard. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I shouldn't have said that." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected an apology. Neither had Anna. She crossed her arms. "Then say it properly." The boy shifted, then looked straight at Lucas. "I'm sorry," he said louder this time. Lucas hesitated, then lifted his hands slowly. He signed something simple. And Daniel translated softly. He says, "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning." The boy blinked. "What's he saying?" Anna pointed to Lucas. "He forgives you, but you gotta do better." The boy nodded quickly, backing away. "Yeah, okay." He walked off, shoulders hunched, but not with arrogance this time, with something closer to shame. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked at Lucas, who was already sketching again, the tension gone from his shoulders. Anna crouched beside him, whispering, "See? You changed his mind." Daniel knew she was right. Something had shifted, not just for Lucas, but for everyone who had witnessed it. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the chalk-covered pavement, Daniel realized that cruelty might return again and again. But so too would courage. And every time Lucas lifted his hands, every time Anna stood by him, the world would inch a little closer to understanding. By the fourth day, the fountain had become something of a gathering place. It wasn't official, no one had planned it, but word had spread through the park, whispered from one parent to another, passed along by curious joggers and elderly regulars. People began drifting to the fountain not just for water or shade, but to see the boy who didn't speak, the girl with ribbons, and the pictures that kept appearing in chalk on the stone. Daniel noticed it as soon as he parked. More families than usual were scattered near the fountain. Some stood back, pretending to check their phones. Others leaned casually against benches. They weren't obvious, but Daniel's instincts as a businessman told him the truth. They were watching, waiting. Lucas, unaware of the quiet attention, clutched his chalk tin eagerly. Anna spotted him from across the pavement and waved with both arms. She had a juice box in one hand, a cookie in the other, crumbs decorating her yellow dress like medals of honor. "You're late," she called as Lucas ran to her. She thrust the cookie into his hand. "I saved you one." Lucas looked at her, then at the cookie, then signed carefully, "Thank you." Anna mimicked the motion, a little smoother this time. "Thank you," she repeated, beaming. Daniel sat on the bench again, hands clasped. He had learned to let the children have their space, to resist the urge to shield his son from every sting of the world. It wasn't easy. His protective instincts screamed at him every time someone stared too long. But he also knew Lucas needed to stand in the light, not hide in the shadows. Lucas began drawing immediately. Today, he started with a circle, wide and careful, taking up the center of the pavement. Inside it, he drew hands, dozens of them reaching inward. Some were small, some large, some with rings, some plain. All connected in the circle. Anna tilted her head. "What's that?" Lucas signed slowly, deliberately. "Together. Safe." Daniel's throat tightened. He repeated softly for Anna. "He says together. Safe." Anna's eyes widened. "It's like everyone holding hands." She looked around suddenly. then shouted to the other children who had gathered to watch. "Come here. Help us." The crowd hesitated, uncertain. But curiosity was stronger than fear. A girl stepped forward first, kneeling to add her own chalk handprint inside the circle. Then another child joined. Then another. Soon, half a dozen kids were crouched beside Lucas, tracing their palms in color. Anna laughed in delight. "See? Now it's real?" Lucas looked around, his eyes wide, breath-catching as he saw other hands join his drawing. He pressed his palms to his chest and signed, "Happy." "Brave," Daniel whispered the translation, and the children nodded, even if they didn't fully understand. Something in his face, in Anna's fierce grin, told them it mattered. An older man shuffled closer, leaning on his cane. "Mind if I join?" he asked. Daniel blinked in surprise, then nodded. The man knelt slowly, pressing his gnarled hand against the pavement, tracing around it with white chalk. Anna clapped. "Yes, grown-ups too." The circle grew. Parents added their hands. Teenagers too cool to admit they cared scribbled quick outlines. Toddlers smeared color with chubby fingers. By the time the sun was leaning west, the pavement was filled with a rainbow of hands joined together. Daniel stood, his chest tight, his throat aching. He snapped a photo this time, knowing the chalk would fade, but the image needed to remain. But then, just as warmth had spread through the crowd, a shadow fell over it. The tall boy had returned. He stood at the edge, watching the circle of hands with an unreadable expression. For the first time, he didn't sneer. He just stared, his soda bottle dangling loosely at his side. Anna noticed him. She straightened, chin high. "Do you want to add your hand?" she asked. Her voice carried across the circle. The crowd went quiet, waiting. The boy shifted uncomfortably. His eyes flicked to Lucas, who held his chalk tightly, watching him with a mix of fear and fragile hope. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, awkwardly, the boy crouched down. He pressed his palm against the pavement. His fingers trembled as he outlined it in pale yellow. No one spoke. The only sound was the chalk scraping stone. When he finished, he stood quickly, shoving his hands in his pockets. "There," he muttered. Then he walked away, head low, leaving the yellow outline behind. Anna turned to Lucas, whispering, "See? You changed him." Lucas's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. He signed, "Hope," Daniel translated softly, voice breaking. "He says, hope." The word hung in the air, catching on the evening breeze, and for a moment, everyone around the fountain felt its weight. As the crowd drifted away, Daniel crouched beside his son. "You're building something, champ," he whispered. "Something bigger than chalk." Lucas looked at him, puzzled. But Daniel only smiled and tapped his heart. "Someday, you'll understand." That night, when Daniel tucked his son into bed, Lucas signed one last word before sleep claimed him: family. Daniel kissed his forehead. "Yes," he whispered. Family. The following weekend, the fountain looked different. The chalk circle of hands was mostly gone now, washed away by a light rain that had fallen overnight. Only faint smudges remained, ghostly traces of what had been. But Daniel noticed something as soon as he arrived with Lucas. People were already gathering again, and some were carrying chalk of their own. Anna came running across the pavement, her braids flying. "You came back," she shouted, as though there had ever been a chance he wouldn't. She thrust a small box of chalk toward Lucas. "Look, my mom bought me some. Now we can both draw." Lucas's eyes lit up. He opened the box carefully, pulling out a stick of purple. He glanced at Anna, then signed, "Thank you." Anna grinned, repeating the sign. "Thank you." Her fingers were clumsy, but less so than before. She looked at Daniel proudly. "I'm getting better, right?" Daniel smiled. "You are." He sat on the bench, watching the two children settle into their spot near the fountain. There was something sacred about that patch of pavement now. Today, Lucas didn't start with a drawing. Instead, he tapped Anna on the arm and began showing her signs slowly, patiently. Sunday, he spread his fingers in a circle above his head. Anna copied, laughing at her own crooked hands. Lucas corrected her gently, guiding her fingers until she got it right. "Sun," she said aloud, "like the one you draw." Lucas nodded eagerly, then signed another. "Water." His hand rippled downward like a wave. Anna repeated it, her movements more confident this time. "Water," she said. Within minutes, the two had created a rhythm, Lucas signing, Anna repeating, sometimes fumbling, always laughing. She was learning, piece by piece, a new language. Others began to notice. A small group of parents stood nearby, whispering to each other. A teenage girl took out her phone, recording quietly. The murmurs weren't cruel this time, they were curious, even admiring. Daniel felt pride swell in his chest. He had spent years hiring specialists, paying for the best therapists, the finest equipment. Yet here was his son, teaching a 6-year-old girl with no formal training, and succeeding. Lucas wasn't just communicating, he was connecting. After a while, Anna sat back on her heels, panting dramatically. "Whew, this is hard work," she said. Then she looked at Lucas with a mischievous grin. "But guess what, I'm learning, and soon, I'll know all your words." Lucas signed carefully. "Friend." "Brave." "Always." Anna turned to Daniel, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" Daniel's throat tightened. "He said you're his brave friend." "Always." Anna's smile faltered for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of it. Then she flung her arms around Lucas. "Always," she whispered into his shoulder. The crowd around them grew. More children wandered over, kneeling on the pavement with bits of chalk. "Can you teach us too?" one of them asked. Anna puffed out her chest proudly. "Sure, he taught me, now I'll teach you." She looked at Lucas. "Okay. Show us another." Lucas blinked, surprised, then slowly raised his hands again. "Hello." He swept his hand outward in greeting. Anna copied, then the other children followed, giggling at their awkward attempts. Soon, 6 kids were practicing, their little hands waving in unison. Passersby stopped to watch. An elderly woman wiped her eyes, whispering to her husband. "It's beautiful." A young man crouched to join in, learning the sign from Anna. The pavement filled with voices and hands, a new kind of conversation. For Lucas, it was overwhelming. His chest rose and fell quickly, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at Anna, uncertainty flickering across his face. She noticed immediately and squeezed his hand. "It's okay," she said softly. "They're not laughing this time. They want to be like you." Lucas stared at her, then at the children signing clumsily around him. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. His hands steadied. He signed again, stronger this time. "Friend." The children repeated it, their voices overlapping. "Friend. Friend." Daniel sat back, his vision blurring. He had dreamed of moments like this, dreamed of his son being accepted, understood. He had thought it would come through programs, through experts, through money. He never imagined it would come through a 6-year-old girl with pink ribbons and relentless courage. As the sun sank lower, Daniel noticed movement at the edge of the crowd. The tall boy was there again, standing alone, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His face was unreadable. For a long time, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he raised one hand and copied the sign he had just seen. "Hello." Anna saw him and gasped. "Look," she whispered to Lucas. "He's trying." Lucas blinked, stunned. His hands trembled. Then he signed back. "Hello." The boy hesitated, then gave a quick nod and walked away. But not before a faint smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. Anna turned to Lucas, whispering fiercely, "See? You're changing people." Lucas pressed his palms to his chest and signed one word with shining eyes. "Hope." Daniel whispered the translation, voice breaking. "Hope." The crowd dispersed eventually. But the feeling lingered. Like the afterglow of sunlight on water, Lucas and Anna lay back on the pavement, staring up at the evening sky. Teach me the word for this, Anna said, pointing upward. Lucas signed carefully, sky. Anna repeated it, her voice soft, sky. She turned her head toward him. It's big, just like you. Lucas blinked, then signed, together. Anna whispered back, together. Daniel watched them, his heart full. The chalk would fade, the drawings would wash away, but something far greater was being written here, something no rain could erase. The next day, the fountain was quieter than usual. The weekend crowd had thinned, and the air carried a crispness that hinted at autumn. Leaves, just beginning to turn, skittered across the pavement where yesterday's chalk drawings had already faded into pale smudges. Daniel guided Lucas toward the familiar spot. Lucas clutched his chalk tin, his steps lighter than they had been a week ago. Each visit now held anticipation, not dread. Each day, he knew Anna would be waiting, and she was. Anna sat on the edge of the fountain, swinging her legs, pink ribbons fluttering with each bounce. When she spotted them, she jumped up and waved both hands wildly. "You're here," she shouted, running toward Lucas. She signed quickly, "Friend," and Lucas signed back. Happy. Daniel smiled, watching them. He couldn't remember the last time his son had moved with such eagerness. For so long, Lucas had lived, guarded, curled inward against the cruelty of the world. But now, he stepped into each day with hands open, ready to share. The children settled on the pavement, chalk already in hand. Lucas began sketching a tree, its branches wide, its roots deep. Anna added a swing to the branches, laughing when Lucas corrected her uneven lines. "Better?" she asked. Lucas signed, "Perfect." She beamed, "Perfect." But peace never lasted long. The tall boy returned. This time, he wasn't alone. 3 other boys trailed behind him, bigger, louder, carrying their swagger like a shield. They stopped a few feet from the drawing, snickering. One pointed. "Look, it's the little deaf kid again." Lucas's hand froze mid-stroke. His shoulders hunched. The light in his eyes flickered. Anna stood immediately, hands on her hips. "Leave him alone," she snapped. The boys laughed. "What's he gonna do if we don't? He can't even talk." One cupped his hand to his ear mockingly. "Hey, can you hear me now?" The cruelty hit like a slap. Lucas shrank back, his chalk slipping from his fingers. He pressed his hands to his chest, trembling. Daniel rose from the bench, every muscle tensed. But before he could step in, Anna dropped to her knees beside Lucas. She took his hands firmly in hers and whispered, "Don't hide, show them." Lucas shook his head, tears brimming. His hands trembled violently. Anna's voice rose, "Don't you see? They're scared. That's why they laugh. But you're stronger." She lifted his hands gently, placing the chalk back between his fingers. Draw. The crowd that had begun to gather held its breath. Lucas looked at Anna, then at the mocking boys. Slowly, shakily, he bent down and pressed chalk to stone. His strokes wavered at first, but then steadied. He drew a figure small, with hands raised. Beside it, he drew another figure, larger, bending down. Their hands touched. Above them, he sketched a circle of light. The crowd murmured. Anna gasped. "That's us," she whispered. The tallest boy scoffed. "It's just chalk." But his voice wavered. Anna spun toward him, her face blazing. "No, it's his voice. And it's louder than yours will ever be." Silence fell. The boy flushed, shifting under the weight of eyes upon him. His friends muttered, tugged at his sleeve, but he didn't move. He just stared at the drawing, jaw tight. Daniel stepped forward now, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You see that?" he said, pointing to the figures on the pavement. "That's courage. That's strength. And one day, you'll realize laughter at someone else's pain doesn't make you strong, it makes you small." The boy's face crumpled slightly, though he tried to mask it with a scowl. He muttered something under his breath and turned away. His friends followed, their laughter hollow, fading as they walked off. Lucas sat frozen, tears streaming silently down his cheeks, but his hands stayed on the chalk, finishing the circle of light. Anna squeezed his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside them, his voice thick. "I'm proud of you, champ. You spoke louder than anyone today." Lucas sniffled, then raised his hands. "Brave." Together, Anna copied, tears in her eyes. "Brave." Together. That. The small crowd clapped softly, the sound gentle, respectful. Some knelt to add their own chalk lines to the circle of light, extending it outward until it glowed across the pavement. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel realized something. Cruelty would always return, sharp and sudden as a storm. But with Anna beside him, Lucas had found a shield and a new language, one no insult could silence. That night, when Lucas lay in bed, he signed one last phrase before closing his eyes. "Not broken." Daniel kissed his forehead. "Never," he whispered. "Never broken." The next morning dawned gray and cool, the kind of San Francisco day when fog lingered low over the city like a blanket pulled too tight. Daniel drove Lucas to the park anyway, his son holding the chalk tin on his lap, tapping it nervously with one finger. Anna was waiting. She sat on the fountain's edge, rubbing her arms against the chill, her pink ribbons damp with mist. When she spotted them, she leapt up, waving wildly. "You came!" she cried. Lucas hurried to her, his sneakers slapping the wet pavement. He opened the chalk box immediately, but the sticks inside were soft and crumbling, still damp from yesterday's rain. He frowned, turning them over in his small hands. Anna bit her lip. "It's okay, we can still draw." She picked up a broken piece of yellow, pressed it into his palm, and whispered, "Show me something." Lucas hesitated, then knelt. The chalk smeared more than it marked. But slowly, stubbornly, he began to shape an image. First, a wide circle, then a smaller one inside it, then lines radiating outward, crooked in the wetness but determined. Anna crouched beside him, watching. "It's a light," she said softly. Lucas nodded, signing with one hand while he drew with the other. "Hope." Anna copied the sign clumsily. "Hope," she repeated, her voice breaking the morning silence. Daniel stood a few steps back, his breath misting in the air. He felt the word like a stone dropped into his chest, rippling outward. Hope. His son had never used that sign before. Other children began to gather, drawn not by laughter this time but by curiosity. They crouched around Lucas, watching as the circle of light grew larger, spreading across the damp pavement. Some picked up bits of chalk themselves, adding their own rays. The gray morning brightened with color. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a voice cut in. "What's the point? It'll wash away again." The tall boy had returned. He stood with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. His tone wasn't sharp this time, it was weary, almost bitter. Anna stood immediately, her chin high. "The point is, it matters now," she snapped. "Even if it fades later, it mattered when we made it." The boy scowled. "It's just chalk." Lucas froze, chalk trembling in his fingers. For a moment, Daniel thought he would stop, retreat into himself again. But then Anna dropped to her knees beside him. "Show him," she whispered. "Don't let him win." Lucas's hands shook, but he pressed the chalk harder. He drew two figures inside the circle of light, small, holding hands. Then he looked up at the boy, his eyes steady. His hands rose, signing deliberately, "Not broken." Anna gasped softly. She turned to the boy. "He says he's not broken." The boy's face twisted. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. Instead, he shifted uneasily, glancing at the crowd watching him. His gaze lingered on the circle of light, on the two small figures inside it. His lips pressed together, and without another word, he turned and walked away. The silence he left behind was heavier than his insults. But then Anna clapped her hands, breaking it. "See? You told him? You told everybody." Lucas's chest rose and fell rapidly. But his eyes shone. He signed quickly, "Brave." Daniel crouched beside him, voice thick with pride. "Yes, son." brave and strong. The children around them began to add more rays to the circle, extending it wider, brighter, until the entire fountain plaza seemed lit from the ground itself. Some traced words beside it: hope, friend, family. By the time the sun broke through the fog, the pavement had become a canvas of light. That evening, Daniel sat with Lucas at the kitchen table. The chalk tin rested between them, nearly empty. Lucas picked up a small nub of blue, turning it in his fingers. He looked at his father and signed. More chalk. Daniel smiled. We'll get more, champ. As much as you need. Lucas hesitated, then signed another word. Tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Yes, tomorrow. But inside, he felt something stirring deeper. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another day at the park. Tomorrow would be another chance for his son to shine. And Daniel, no matter what it took, would make sure the world saw it. Sunday afternoon came bright and warm, the kind of day that seemed borrowed from summer. The park was crowded again, families spread across blankets, vendors selling ice cream, kites sailing above the lawn. Daniel parked the SUV and stepped out with Lucas, who clutched a brand new box of chalk. Daniel had bought it that morning. A rainbow pack with colors so vivid they seemed to glow even through the cardboard. Lucas held it close, as if it were treasure. His eyes darted toward the fountain, already searching for Anna. She was there. She spotted him first, waving with both arms, her braids swinging like banners. You came, she shouted, running across the pavement. Lucas ran to meet her, their steps colliding in laughter and silent smiles. She pointed at the chalk box, eyes wide. New colors? Lucas nodded eagerly, signing, yes, friend, draw. Anna copied the signs as best she could, her little fingers stumbling but her grin unstoppable. She grabbed his hand and tugged him toward their usual spot. Daniel followed at a slower pace, but his heart raced. He had told himself he was only here to supervise, to make sure nothing went wrong. But the truth was simpler and far more vulnerable. He wanted to see. Really see. The children knelt together, opening the chalk box like a chest of jewels. Lucas picked a stick of red and began carefully sketching lines that stretched upward like beams. Anna added yellow arcs around them. Slowly, an image took shape. A sun rising behind a bridge. People gathered quickly. By now, word of the drawings had spread. Joggers paused. Parents nudged their children closer. And strangers lingered at the edges. They watched as Lucas's hands moved with speed and certainty. His silence filled with color. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had always known his son's art was special. But he had seen it only in private in sketchbooks, on bedroom walls, in the safety of home. To see it here, before a crowd, was different. It wasn't just art, it was courage. Anna turned suddenly, calling to the group of children nearby. Come on, help us. She thrust pieces of chalk into their hands. Some hesitated, but curiosity pulled them in. Soon, half a dozen kids were crouched beside Lucas, adding lines to the bridge, rays to the Sunday. Lucas's eyes widened, his breath quickening. For years, he had drawn alone. Now, his picture was being built by many hands. He pressed his palms to his chest and signed. Together, Daniel whispered the translation. He says together, the crowd murmured, touched. Some adults knelt to join, tracing their palms in color around the edge. The bridge stretched wider, brighter. The sun grew taller, its rays spilling across the plaza. Then Daniel saw it the moment that broke him open. Lucas turned to Anna, hesitated, then signed a phrase with trembling fingers. Not afraid. Anna gasped. What did he say? Daniel's voice cracked. He said, not afraid. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then Anna threw her arms around Lucas, nearly knocking the chalk box over. Me neither, she whispered fiercely. Not afraid. Daniel's vision blurred. He dropped to a crouch, unable to stay standing any longer. His son had never spoken those words to him, not with hands, not with eyes, not in any form. To hear them now, in the middle of a crowd, was like being handed a miracle. The applause started softly. From one person, then another. Soon the whole crowd was clapping, not loudly, but steadily, a rhythm of respect. Lucas looked around, startled. His chest rose and fell quickly, his eyes wide. For a moment, Daniel feared he would retreat, overwhelmed. But then Anna squeezed his hand, steadying him. Lucas lifted his chin, his hands moving again. Hope, Daniel translated, voice breaking. He says hope. The word rippled through the crowd, catching on the breeze, settling into hearts. And in that moment, Daniel saw not just his son, but the man he might one day become, not defined by silence, not diminished by difference, but rising, like the sun in his drawing, unstoppable. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Daniel pulled Lucas into his arms. He held him tightly, whispering into his hair, "Son, today you taught me more than I could ever teach you." Lucas pressed his small hands against his father's chest and signed one word, love. Daniel closed his eyes, tears slipping free. Love, he echoed. The sun set behind them, golden light spilling across the chalk bridge and the circle of hands that surrounded it. And Daniel knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. Monday came with a different energy. The park was quieter, stripped of its weekend crowds. But the fountain still held its quiet power. The chalk bridge and sun were faded now, smudged by countless footsteps. But the spirit of it remained. People passing by still glanced down, some smiling faintly, as though they could still see the color. Daniel walked with Lucas toward their familiar spot. His son clutched the chalk box tightly, as if guarding it from the world. Daniel knew this ritual was no longer just play. It was a declaration, repeated every day, that his boy would not be hidden. Anna was waiting. She skipped across the pavement, pink ribbons flying, her grin wide. "I brought something," she announced, pulling a notebook from her small backpack. The cover was scuffed, the corners bent. She opened it to reveal shaky drawings of letters, some backward, some crooked. "I'm practicing," she explained proudly. "I want to write what he says." "Ah." Lucas's eyes widened. He touched the notebook reverently, then signed. "Smart. Brave," Daniel translated, his throat thick. "He says you're smart and brave." Anna blushed. "Tell him I think he's brave too." Lucas didn't need the words. He saw it in her eyes. They knelt to draw again, sketching shapes that quickly became a tree with sprawling branches. Lucas worked on the trunk. Anna filled in flowers at the roots. Their rhythm was easy now, their laughter flowing without pause. But peace rarely lasted. From the corner of his eye, Daniel saw a familiar figure approaching. The tall boy. His pace was slower, but his eyes still carried the edge of defiance. Two other boys followed, whispering. Anna spotted them immediately. She jumped up, fists clenched. "What do you want?" she demanded. The boy smirked. "Just seeing if the little mute is still playing pretend." His friends chuckled, the sound brittle. Lucas froze, chalk dropping from his hand, his shoulders hunched, the familiar fear creeping back. Anna planted her feet. "He's not pretending. He's talking. You're just too mean to listen." The boy stepped closer, his voice low. "He'll never be normal. And neither will you, if you hang around him." Daniel rose from the bench, ready to intervene, but then Lucas did something none of them expected. He stood. His small body shook, but he faced the boy directly. His hands rose, trembling but determined. Slowly, carefully, he signed, "Not broken." Strong. The crowd that had begun to gather fell silent. Anna gasped. She grabbed his hand, raised it high like a champion's. "Did you hear that?" she shouted. "He says he's strong." The tall boy faltered. His smirk wavered, his eyes darting to the faces watching him. For the first time, he looked unsure. Daniel stepped forward now, his voice calm but resonant. "Do you know what strength is?" he asked the boy. "It's not laughing at someone different. It's standing when the world tries to push you down. Look at him. Look at what he's doing. That's strength." The boy's face flushed. His friends shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, Let's just go. But the boy didn't move. He glared at Lucas, then at Anna, then at Daniel. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought he might lash out. Instead, he spat on the ground, muttered, "Whatever," and walked away. His friends followed, their steps quick, almost nervous. Silence lingered for a moment. Then Anna turned to Lucas, her eyes blazing with pride. "You did it," she whispered. "You didn't hide. You told him." Lucas's chest heaved, his face pale. But slowly, a smile broke through. He signed, "Brave, together." Anna shouted it to the crowd. "He says we're brave together." Applause rippled through the small gathering, not loud but steady. Some parents clapped softly, others nodded with respect. A woman bent down to her daughter and whispered, "See? That's what courage looks like." "Oh." Daniel crouched beside his son, pulling him into his arms. "I've never been prouder, champ," he whispered. "Never." Lucas pressed his palms to his father's chest and signed one word, "Hope." Daniel closed his eyes, letting the words sink deep. "Hope," he echoed. That night, when Lucas lay in bed, he signed again before drifting to sleep. "Not afraid." Daniel kissed his forehead. "Not afraid," he whispered back. And for the first time in years, he believed it. The next morning, Daniel awoke before dawn. The mansion was silent, but he could not sleep. He poured himself coffee and stood at the wide kitchen window, staring out at the bay where the water shimmered silver under the first light. His son's hands haunted his thoughts, the trembling signs, the bold declaration, not broken, strong. For years, Daniel had carried the fear that Lucas would never find his place, that he would always live on the edges, misunderstood. But yesterday, in front of mocking laughter, his son had stood tall. And Anna, tiny, fierce Anna, had stood with him. Daniel felt something shift inside. Something he hadn't allowed himself in years, belief. When Lucas padded sleepily into the kitchen, dragging his blanket, Daniel scooped him up and kissed the top of his head. "Today," he whispered, "we celebrate you." Lucas blinked, rubbing his eyes, then signed, "Anna?" Daniel chuckled. "Of course, Anna too." "Oh." By mid-morning they were at the park again. The fountain glistened under a clear sky. Anna was already waiting. Her yellow dress faded from wear, but her smile as bright as ever. She spotted them and ran forward, nearly tripping over her own feet. "You came!" Lucas lifted his hands immediately, signing, "Friend, happy." Anna copied, though her fingers were still clumsy. "Friend, happy." She giggled. "See, I'm learning." Daniel carried a paper bag with him today. He set it down beside the children and pulled out sandwiches, fruit, and small bottles of juice. "Lunch on me," he said. Anna's eyes widened. "For me too?" "Of course," Daniel said warmly. "Anyone brave enough to stand by my son deserves a sandwich." They ate together on the steps of the fountain. Anna chattered between bites, telling stories about school, about her mother's long hours cleaning houses, about the puppy she dreamed of having someday. Lucas listened intently, his eyes following every expression. Occasionally he signed a word, and Anna would lean close, eager to understand. After lunch, Lucas pulled out his chalk. He began sketching carefully, his strokes deliberate. Today he drew a heart large, uneven, but strong. Inside it, he added 3 small figures, 1 tall, 2 small, holding hands. Anna gasped. "That's us," she pointed. "You, me, and your dad." Lucas nodded, his hands rising. Anna's eyes glistened. She touched the drawing gently. "Family," she whispered. Then she looked at Daniel. "Is that really what he means?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, that's exactly what he means." The moment hung heavy, beautiful. But it did not last. The tall boy appeared again, hovering at the edge of the plaza. This time, he was alone. His posture was stiff, his jaw tight. For a moment, Daniel braced for another insult, but the boy didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the heart on the pavement. Anna noticed first. She leapt to her feet, fists clenched. "What do you want now?" The boy shuffled, scuffing his shoe against the stone. His voice, when it came, was lower, uncertain. I was wrong yesterday. Anna blinked. What? The boy's eyes darted to Lucas. You're not broken, he muttered. His words were awkward, but they carried weight. I shouldn't have said that. The plaza went silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Lucas froze, staring. Slowly, his hands rose. He signed, "Forgive." Daniel translated softly. He says he forgives you. The boy's face flushed. He nodded quickly, then turned to leave. But before he could, Anna shouted, "Wait, come back tomorrow. Bring chalk. If you really mean it, draw with us." The boy hesitated, then gave a quick nod before walking away. Lucas turned to Anna, his eyes shining. He signed, "Brave. Hope." Anna clapped her hands. Yes, brave and hope. Daniel felt his chest swell. Something incredible was happening here, something bigger than chalk and drawings. His son was teaching not just Anna, not just himself, but even those who had once been cruel. That night, after tucking Lucas into bed, Daniel lingered at the doorway, watching his son sleep. His small hands rested open on the blanket. Chalk dust still faint on his skin. Daniel whispered into the quiet room, "I promise, son. I'll never let the world silence you again." It wasn't just a vow to Lucas. It was a vow to himself. The next afternoon, the Fountain Plaza felt charged, as if the air itself held its breath. Daniel noticed it the moment he arrived with Lucas. More people than usual lingered near the fountain. Parents sat on benches, their children restless with expectation. Even joggers slowed, pretending to tie their shoes just to stay longer. Word had spread. Anna was already there, sitting cross-legged with her little backpack at her side. She jumped up the moment she saw them, ribbons bouncing. "You're late," she teased, running forward. Lucas hurried to meet her, chalk tin rattling in his hand. They knelt together quickly, pulling out chalk. Lucas began sketching a wide arc, Anna filling it with clumsy strokes of yellow. Together they shaped the beginning of a rainbow. Then Daniel saw him, the tall boy. He approached slowly, shoulders squared but not with arrogance this time. His steps carried hesitation, even nerves. In his hand was a small box of chalk. The cardboard bent as if it had been stuffed in his pocket all morning. Anna noticed him and sprang to her feet. Her chin jutted high, ready for battle. "Well?" she demanded. "Did you bring it?" The boy lifted the box. "Yeah." His voice was flat, but not cruel. Lucas stared, eyes wide. His hands trembled on the chalk. Daniel felt the tension thrum through the crowd. Parents leaned forward. Children hushed each other. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Anna crossed her arms. "Then draw." The boy hesitated, then crouched slowly on the pavement beside Lucas. His movements were stiff, uncertain. He pulled out a stick of green chalk and pressed it to the stone. At first his lines were clumsy, awkward, just a scribble of grass at the base of the rainbow. Lucas froze, watching. Then, cautiously, he bent down and extended the grass with his own strokes, neat and steady. The boy glanced at him, startled. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Then he bent down again, adding more. Side by side, they filled the bottom of the rainbow with green. Anna let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "See, you can do it." Her voice softened, less defiant now, more hopeful. The crowd murmured. An elderly woman whispered, "That boy's learning." Lucas signed slowly, deliberately. "Together," Daniel translated. He says, "Together." The tall boy swallowed hard. He looked at Lucas's hands, then at the rainbow forming above them. His own hand trembled as he picked up a stick of blue chalk and added a line to the arc. Anna clapped. "Yes, you're helping." For the first time, the boy's lips twitched into the faintest smile. It was small, fleeting, but it was real. They worked in silence, building the rainbow piece by piece. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Children from the crowd joined in, kneeling to add colors, laughter bubbling through the air. The pavement transformed into a spectrum of hope stretching across the fountain plaza. When it was done, Lucas stepped back, staring at the rainbow with wide eyes. His hands rose, trembling but certain. Hope. Family. Daniel's voice cracked as he translated. He says, hope. Family. Anna flung her arms around him, laughing through tears. Family, she shouted. Yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Some clapped softly, others cheered. Parents hugged their children. Strangers smiled at one another. It was as if the rainbow itself had cast its light not just on the stone, but on every heart present. The tall boy stood slowly, chalk dust on his fingers. He looked at Lucas, then at Anna, then at Daniel. For a moment, his face was unreadable. Then he nodded quick, sharp, almost shy, and walked away. But his step was lighter than before. Daniel crouched beside his son, pulling him into a tight embrace. You did it, champ, he whispered. You turned enemies into friends. Lucas leaned into him, his small hands pressing against Daniel's chest. He signed one last word. Love. Daniel closed his eyes, holding him close. Love, he echoed. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the rainbow on the pavement glowed in the fading light. Fragile but brilliant. And Daniel knew this was more than chalk. It was a promise. The rainbow was still there the next morning, faint but visible, its colors softened by dew and footsteps. Daniel parked near the fountain and helped Lucas out of the SUV. The boy carried his chalk tin carefully, cradling it like it held something sacred. Anna was already waiting, waving wildly with both arms. Come on, she called, running to meet him. I have an idea today. Lucas tilted his head, curious. His hands moved. What? Anna grinned. We're going to make words. She pulled a piece of white chalk from her pocket and wrote, big and clumsy across the pavement, hope. Lucas stared. His chest rose and fell quickly. He bent down, his small hands trembling, and added to the letters. His strokes were neat, deliberate, reshaping the crooked edges until the word stood bold and straight. Hope. Daniel felt his throat tighten. The crowd that had begun to gather murmured softly. Parents nudged their children closer. An elderly couple held hands. Watching intently, Anna stood proudly. Now teach me how to say it with my hands. Lucas blinked, then raised his palms slowly. He signed carefully, showing her the movement. She copied it, fumbling, then tried again. Lucas corrected her gently, guiding her fingers. Finally she got it. Hope, she said aloud, her voice ringing across the plaza. The small crowd clapped quietly. Other children stepped forward. Teach us too, one girl cried. Soon half a dozen little hands were raised, waiting. Lucas's eyes widened, panic flickering in his face. He looked to his father, uncertain. Daniel crouched beside him, his voice steady. It's okay, son. They're not laughing. They're asking to learn. Lucas hesitated, then raised his hands again. Slowly, patiently, he showed them the sign. One by one, the children copied it, giggling at their mistakes, trying again until they got it right. Soon, a ring of hands moved in unison, silent voices speaking the same word, hope. The crowd clapped louder now. Some parents joined in, learning the sign themselves. A young woman wiped tears from her cheeks. A man whispered, He's teaching us. Lucas looked around, his chest heaving. His silence had always felt like a cage, but here it was something else, something powerful. His hands were not weakness. They were language. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a familiar figure appeared. The tall boy. He stood still for a long moment, watching the circle of children signing. His jaw tightened. His hands fidgeted at his sides. Finally, he stepped forward. Show me too, he muttered. The plaza went quiet. Anna's eyes narrowed. Are you serious? The boy nodded, his face flushed. Yeah, show me. Lucas froze. His hands hovered uncertainly. The memory of cruel words still lingered. But then he looked at Anna, who gave him a fierce nod. Slowly, deliberately, Lucas raised his hands and showed the sign. The boy copied it, clumsy at first, then again, better. Finally, he got it. He looked at Lucas, his eyes uncertain. "Hope," he said aloud. Anna gasped. "You did it!" The crowd erupted in applause. Some cheered, some cried. The boy flushed deeper, but this time it wasn't shame, it was something closer to pride. Lucas stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised his hands again. "Friend," Daniel's voice cracked as he translated. "He says, friend." The boy swallowed hard. He nodded quickly. "Friend," he echoed. Anna clapped her hands. "See, even you can change." The boy muttered, "Yeah." Then stepped back, his face unreadable. But Daniel saw it, the softening in his eyes, the way his shoulders eased. Something had shifted. As the crowd dispersed, Daniel crouched beside his son, pulling him into a tight hug. "Do you know what you did today?" he whispered. "You spoke louder than anyone here, and you never said a word." Lucas pressed his small hands against his father's chest and signed one last phrase. Not silence, voice. Daniel's eyes filled. He kissed the top of his son's head. "Yes, champ. Your hands are your voice. And the world is finally listening." The final Saturday of summer bloomed bright and warm. Golden light poured through the trees of Golden Gate Park, painting the fountain plaza in brilliance. Daniel parked the SUV as usual. But today felt different. He could sense it in the stillness of the air, in the way his son gripped the chalk box like it held destiny inside. Anna was already waiting, her ribbons brighter than ever, her smile wide. She ran toward Lucas, arms flung wide. "I knew you'd come." Lucas met her halfway. His steps quick, his face glowing. He opened the chalk tin and held it out. Anna peered inside and gasped. "You brought the big ones." Daniel had bought a professional set, thick sticks of vibrant colors, the kind artists used on city streets. They hurried to the plaza. The crowd was already there, families, joggers, old couples, teenagers. Word had spread beyond the park now. People had come not just to watch, but to be part of something. Even the tall boy was there, standing at the edge, his face uncertain but softer than it had ever been. Lucas knelt and pulled out a stick of white chalk. Slowly, carefully, he began to draw. Wide lines swept across the stone, then curves, then arcs. Anna crouched beside him, adding her clumsy strokes. The picture grew, piece by piece. At first, it looked like a circle. Then rays stretched outward, longer and longer. Around it, Lucas drew small figures, dozens of them each with hands raised. Some were children, some tall, some stooped. A community gathered around the light. Anna's eyes widened. "It's everyone," she whispered. Lucas nodded, his hands rising. "Together, strong, family." Daniel translated, his voice breaking. He says together. Strong. Family. The crowd murmured. Parents pulled their children closer. Strangers wiped their eyes. Anna looked around suddenly, then shouted, "Come on, help us finish." She thrust chalk into the hands of children, of parents, of anyone who stood nearby. Soon, dozens knelt on the pavement, tracing figures, adding color, shaping rays. The plaza transformed. What had begun as one boy's drawing became the work of many hands. Red, yellow, blue, green spilled across the stone, weaving into one image. Lucas stood in the middle, chalk dust on his fingers, his eyes wide as he watched others complete what he had begun. For once, he wasn't alone. His silence wasn't empty. His voice was everywhere, echoed in colors and hands. Then, without warning, he dropped the chalk and raised his hands high. His movements were bold, unshaken. He signed with all the strength in his small body. Not broken, not afraid. Hope. The plaza went silent. Daniel's chest heaved. He stepped forward, translating, his voice trembling but strong. He says, not broken, not afraid, hope. Applause erupted. It wasn't polite, Quiet applause this time. It was thunderous, rolling across the park. People cheered, some shouting his words aloud. Hope, Anna grabbed Lucas's hand, raising it high like a victory banner. See? She shouted. Everybody hears you now. Daniel couldn't hold back. He crouched and pulled his son into his arms, hugging him tightly. Tears slipped down his face, unashamed. You did it, champ, he whispered. The world sees you. The world hears you. Lucas pressed his small palms against his father's chest and signed one last word, love. Daniel kissed his forehead, his voice breaking as he spoke, love. The crowd quieted, but the image on the pavement remained radiant, unshakable. A son of hope, surrounded by family, by friends, by community. As evening settled and the crowd dispersed, Daniel lingered with Lucas and Anna. The chalk would fade. Rain would come. Feet would trample it, but the memory would remain, carved not in stone but in hearts. And for Daniel, for Anna, for Lucas, the boy who had been laughed at, the girl who had been brave enough to stand beside him, and the father who had finally believed this was not the end. It was the beginning. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the plaza. Daniel looked at his son, then at Anna, then back at the drawing. For the first time in his life, he didn't fear tomorrow. He welcomed it. Because tomorrow, and every day after, his son would never stand alone again. The story of Lucas, Anna, and Daniel reminds us that strength is not measured by the loudest voice, but by the courage to stand when others try to silence us. True friendship is found in the small, fearless acts of kindness, like a little girl who saw worth where others saw weakness. And love, expressed not always in words but in action, can turn ridicule into respect, loneliness into family, and despair into hope. In the end, the greatest lesson is simple. No one is broken, no one is less. With compassion and courage, even silence can speak louder than cruelty.